quantify that number and report what you see. And sometimes we're not able to go out there and do studies, measure the content and lobster, and we have to actually do surveys where we get in contact with the fishermen to find out what they have observed over their lifetime. So they start saying things like they don't see any changes in numbers or sizes. That means something. If they do say now that they have to go much further, they have much fewer, it takes 3 days to catch what I did 1 year ago, that means something to the department. So we certainly need to, there are ways for us to quantify that information and take it into account in our decision.
So on that, what are some of the maybe community-driven initiatives, or even just talking about the importance of having like public participation? I know we talked a bit about having stakeholders contribute to like regulation and giving feedback, but how is it that we can get the community more involved in creating a better and more sustainable fisheries? Go down the line, up the line.
Certainly, I commend you for this events. Events like this will certainly reach the stakeholders. But really, truly, when the department or even some NGOs and so forth call for community meetings and we ask you to come and share your opinions, don't be shy. Come out and say what it is. I think sometimes there's an air of distrust. Persons don't think they'll be listened to and so forth. But really, truly, whenever we have these community consultations, we just want to hear the opinions of the persons in our communities as to what they think should happen, what they have observed. And so that's the only way we can respond to their concerns. They share their concerns.
Okay. You don't think so? Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really important point. And I think we need to make it easier for people to provide feedback, and also considering sometimes the limitations that some people may have. They may not be able to provide us with written feedback, but they may be able to have a conversation, and we need to be open and receptive to receiving different kinds of information in different ways, and then providing them with different platforms, I guess, to provide that feedback. So I think that's really important.
And I do want to just shoot one to Alex since he didn't say anything. What would you say if there was someone out there right now who was like, oh, aquaculture sounds kind of cool. Clearly you're saying we need some more people who are specializing in the hatchery side of it. What route would you recommend they take in order to do that? Is there a technical route, or it has to be like an academic route? Like, how best can we build capacity in that area?
I would say probably the best would be to gain experience in the field. Not necessarily here, because it's not huge yet here. Abroad, to get experience from facilities and companies abroad would be awesome. Obviously, there's a lot of research at the research level here, which can be very beneficial to a young person, especially. But I think it's very interconnected to the conservation and sustainable world and the aquaculture world. I think they can mesh closely. I mean, I started out my education and my experience on the conservation side of things. Now I've sort of ended up in the
money
aquaculture side of
things.
Alex is the best one.
Yeah. Oh, yes, you are. You know, that's awesome.
Spring.
Yeah. Yep.
All right, so my final question, and I will turn it over in case anyone in the audience has one, is just, in your opinion, whether that be scientific or emotional, what is the future of sustainable fisheries in the Bahamas? Ladies first?
I'll go. I would say it starts with the community. I mean, it starts with let's take, for example, a fisherman. We see suppliers of our lobster tails, because that's our main industry. The tropic seafood is lobster tails. We see suppliers all the way on the spectrum of they love the ocean, they love the environment, they care about the product. They'll never bring you anything illegal. You know, they're the perfect supplier. Then you get suppliers that are just, you can tell they don't care, quality-wise as well. So it obviously starts at that level. And I think the more you can reach out to those people that are in the industry and on the ground, I think the better.
Yes, I think it's an absolute must in order for us to feed ourselves. And not necessarily only in the commercial way that person would think. For example, there's a need for people to simply be able to catch fish to feed themselves in an emergency. We saw what happened during COVID when the supply chain shut off, didn't go out as much. Persons had to simply venture to the seashore in some communities, sometimes going up to do not unfortunately, but it still showed that we needed those resources to be there. That's why we have these protections around each other. There's no commercial fishing. We need those resources. So that is a key part of sustainable fishing, simply being able to find a meal in the worst of situations. But certainly for the Bahamas, sustainable commercial fishing is a must as well, in that it supports the economy. When we look at our diets, too much red meat and so forth, those are healthy options. We can purchase fish from right here in the Bahamas, reduce our export, well, like our government, our ministry keeps saying, I guess depend on your local resources. But that means that they actually have to be there for us to be able to. So there are many layers in which sustainable fisheries are an absolute must for the Bahamas to continue to exist.
I would agree that it's an absolute must, and I wish I had a crystal ball to look in the future and know everything's going to be okay. But the reality is there are a lot of challenges that we're facing right now with governance. There's a lot of rapid changes that are happening underwater that are impacting the resources that these fisheries need to maintain their populations, that we have to address and have to deal with. And that is going to require working with communities, working with governments, working with funders. But we do need to, I think, definitely make sure that people are more aware of the choices they make and how that's impacting the environment and what that means for their future, because it is a food security thing, but it's also livelihoods that are at stake as well. So the short answer is I don't know. I hope it all works out well, and we'll just keep doing what we can.
I know I said that was the last one, but I'm gonna actually close this. My actual last one now is just if you had to give one word of advice to people listening, if they said, well, what can I do? What part can I play? What's the one thing I can change in my life to help create a more sustainable fishery? What advice would you give to them?
I would simply say obey the fisheries laws and the other environmental laws. So the fisheries laws, none of them are there to just prevent fishermen from accessing fish or making a living. Every single measure we have there is in order for us to promote sustainability, to make sure we can capture enough fish today, next week, next year, future generations as well. And so if you simply obey those laws, and do not turn a blind eye when others disobey them, report those folks. You're not assisting your friends by ignoring it. You're actually allowing them to steal from you and their future generations as well. So it really is a partnership role. We know that although the Defense Force, the Bahamas Police Force, Customs, the Department of Marine Resources, we are all empowered to enforce fisheries laws. But we know with the Bahamas' makeup, there's so many opportunities for us to break these laws undetected. And so we would ask for our partners throughout the Bahamas, the people living in the Bahamas, people visiting the Bahamas, report to us any infractions. Do not support illegal activities. It's really going to take a team effort in order for us to, have sustainable fisheries.
I would say awareness as a community as a whole, and especially with the younger generation. I remember when I worked at BNT a long time ago. Just to see the level of outreach to the younger generation through education is amazing. And you're then bringing up kids 10 years, 15 years down the line that they appreciate and they know what's right and what's wrong. And it's within themselves to have that sort of culture and to have that upbringing to take care of the environment and to be responsible.
I agree with all of those things. And when you can be involved, get involved. If you can support, through your time, through your wallet. Please do.
Thank you. Do we have any questions from the audience? Oh, well, I saw Dr. Bethel first.
Ladies first, of course.
Okay. Dr. Delancey-Montfort.
My question is for Alex. He mentioned that sometimes they can lose fingerlings overnight. Could you, I guess, explain what are the common reasons that you would lose, like have a mass die off like that? Is it anything to do with water quality or anything?
Just for the people in the back, she's asking to Alex, what are some of the reasons that you would lose fingerlings overnight in an aquaculture facility?
Well, it would really depend on the system you have in place. In our case, we have a flow-through system, which means we draw salt water from a well, it goes in the tank, and then it exits the tank and gets put down in an injection well. So the water is used once. In that case, there's a lot less risk than say you had a recirculating system that we use the water and filtered it out. In our case, what we've seen, the most common reason is either an equipment failure where your water supply is shut off and you don't know about it, or you have too high of a density in the tank and you're not monitoring the water quality frequently enough, where you suddenly get a lack of oxygen in the water, or a very, very high buildup of ammonia or nitrogenous waste.
Yeah, fish peat. And Dr. Bethel, and then get the capsule back.
Yes, my question can go to any of you. I do ocean observations, and so I tend towards, let's say, the physical abiotic side of things. So my question now is that if you were to start a mariculture facility or facilities across the entire country here, do you believe that if you were to couple that with observations done by platforms and numerical modeling and forecasting, do you think that would be sufficient now to make it viable on an economic scale?
He's asking about the implementation of mariculture. Is that the word?
Yes.
In complementing forecasting and
Observations.
observations.
Modeling.
Yeah.
Perhaps that perhaps takes it to the next level. I think we're still at the basic level where we need to be able to do the aquaculture that doesn't damage the environment. For example, if you do cage culture, you know that you can have a debris, whatever materials dropping into the seabed, damaging the seabed. If it's an invasive species that is not found in that area, it becomes invasive, that could be a problem. So what you're saying, can actually take things to the next level. You can actually forecast, for example, how much fish you have, also the weather patterns and so forth. That can certainly help. But I think we're still at the stage right now. We have to deal with the fundamentals, protecting the environments and so forth. And the basics about knowing how to grow the different species in the environments and so forth. So yes, what you're saying can happen, but I don't think we're there yet.
I'd say a step back to that is you go at it at a much lower risk model, where you design your facility in such a way that it's not affected by external stressors like weather, hurricanes, something much more controlled. So, an example of that is instead of doing an ocean open cage system, you do something land-based. We have a lot more control.
In the back.
Just a couple of questions. What is your opinion on the count as far as making it seasonal, like lobster? And another one, there was a lot of talk about the lionfish destroying. What is the status of the lionfish out there? And the last one, we talk about agriculture. And let's take a walk down history lane, where we have had a number of agriculture and fisheries in the Bahamas. We had the Diamond Roads, Long Island, they had a shrimp farmland there, but I don't think it worked. In the late 70s, they had Bartard in Andros, Huh?
Showing your age.
Way back. They had started our project, which was in Andros, which was a full agriculture project. And also in Abaco, they had a full citrus farm up there. I won't call the name of the person who had it. These seem to have failed. What have we learned from that and going forward? How do you think it should be done differently?
So we got a question about the conch, a question about the lionfish, and a question about aquaculture and agricultural projects that have been tried and failed in the past. How are we going to minimize those failures? That's from my dad. So let's start with the queen conch.
It's just because you guys are working on regulation.
Yes, so the consideration of a closed season, that's something that's always ongoing with the Department of Marine Resources. But what we look at too is the purpose of the closed season, that is to protect reproduction. Now there are other ways to protect reproduction. For example, you can increase the size limit or implement a more effective size limit. So we're weighing whether a closed season is the best way, whether changing the law where you have a 14 millimeter or 50 millimeter flared lip on the conch. So make sure that much more of them are mature before you harvest them. So that is something we are considering. We're garnering opinions from the public and so forth. And so, I mean, as I said, the department is always responding to the information. And so consideration of closed seasons is always something we're considering. In terms of the lionfish, the latest information that I'm aware of is that the numbers are not what they used to be. I mean, they are still there. I've not seen any recent research since 2018 or so. I know they're still there. We know that they have an ecological impact, but I don't think their numbers are what they once were. Nonetheless, they still remain a threat in the Bahamas. I'll leave the answer to the third question for someone else.
You guys want to input on the first two though? Or?
The only thing I would add with conch is that in order for them to reproduce, there needs to be a certain number of them within an area, so their reproduction is density dependent. So there are definitely other alternatives than having a closed season that would still help populations to recover if you can find healthy breeding grounds, spawning grounds for conch, and if you can still find healthy juvenile populations and they're able to replenish the fishery so long as they're managed effectively. That's the only thing I have that. And I agree with the lionfish. That's kind of tapered off, and I think there was a lot of concern initially, especially things ramped up so quickly. But a lot of the research that's been done looking at impacts, it hasn't been as severe as was predicted to be, but they are still there.
I'll also weigh on the conch. With closed season, I think historically the pushback to that has been that fishermen have always relied on conch in the summertime to get them through the closed season for the lobster. So that's been the pushback on that. As you probably know, is that there's a moratorium on the export of conch now. So obviously, from a business perspective, no business will like that because your demand now is shrunk only to the local market. But it's obvious on a sustainability level that it's needed because you reducing that demand now alleviates the pressure off the fishery. Your third question I'll touch on about the failure of different projects over the years. It really all comes down to the design of your project and your candidate that you've selected to grow, be it a produce like citrus or an animal like a fish. Just recently in Florida, there's a huge project called Atlantic Sapphire. It's a salmon-based aquaculture farm. It's billions and billions of investment, and they've lost hundreds of millions of dollars through their design of their facility. It's very, very complicated, very high tech. It relies on computer-based systems. That's their downfall. If you design your facility in such a way that it's simple, but it has backup, you're going to alleviate that risk. Also, the candidate that you select for your project At Tropic Seafood, we've gone through about 5 different fish over the years as potential candidates for a commercial operation. National grouper, olive flounder, yellowtail, not the snapper, but the other, the jack-like fish. We've kind of landed now on American red snapper for some of the reasons we've discussed today, as just being a very, very, almost a perfect candidate. So I think if you take those things into consideration, you may alleviate this disaster of a failed project.
If I might weigh in on the third question about failed aquaculture projects specifically. I mean, before I joined the department, I did a study that looked at the success rate and what went wrong in a number of projects. It's actually a long history of failed projects. For aquaculture to be successful, there's so many things to go right. You don't only need to have the sustainable funding until you can grow the products enough to make a profit. You also have the technology in order to do it, as well as the technical know-how. You need to have the land and so forth. And so a lot of times you don't have that perfect mix of those items. And then even when you have these really long, successful operations, of which there have been a handful, then you have things like hurricanes like we have which happened in Bahamas, and many, a few other things happened. But I know a person who was operating successfully for many years. There was a joke in the back about the electrical company. Like this person lost all their product due to an unusual power outage that one night. So many things can go wrong. You need so much to go right for it to happen, and that's what the department considers when they get applications. A lot of persons just can't understand why they can't get an area, throw a bunch of conk, and they have a permit, and they know it. We have to guard against environmental damage. We need to make sure that they know what they're doing, and at the end of the day, that if somebody else wanted to use that same area, that the area is still healthy after they use it. So there are great many considerations. Even business acumen comes into it as well. So many things coming into play, but the department is trying its best to support anyone interested, and trying to assist them with advice, putting them onto connections such as Alex and so forth, the Power Branch, and a number of other groups, Ramsey, and so forth. We really truly do need aquaculture to get going here in the Bahamas.
Sure. Good evening. Thanks so much for your very wise comments. I have a question about, well, really just wondering if you can speak to countries who have models where they've tried to prove its sustainability and they're doing it well, whether it's Caribbean or beyond. And then my second question relates to our education and communications here in the Bahamas and what is being done to start this awareness at an earlier age for our youth in schools. If there are some specific programs that can get parents involved as well, can you shed some light on those for awareness purposes?
Yes. You don't mind me going ahead first. Well, so we actually do have a great example right here in the Bahamas. Our lobster fishery is certified sustainable, but it's not perfect. But when you look at the different fisheries around the world, if you examine Canada, for example, they have a wonderful system or systems in place, depending on the particular fishery. For example, they have a wonderful consultation mechanism. They consider indigenous folks' opinions. They consider the science. They consider the local observations. They have top-notch enforcement. They have so many things in place from measuring the status of the stock, as well as the impact on the environment, as well as the governance system. If you look closely at some of their fisheries, those are some really good models to, I guess, to aspire to.
So I guess in terms of educational programs, there are a lot of NGOs within the country that have, designed educational materials for young people in particular. So I would encourage you to visit some of their materials and their websites to see what's available. I know there's been curriculum, Charlene's in the back, that's worked on getting that in schools. I would also say, I lost my train of thought because it's been a long day. I've been up since 6 in the morning, so I'm sorry. What I was going to say though is I think, and there has been a lot of emphasis on young people, we need to work more with stakeholders that are impacting the resource right now. So I think that's something that's important that necessarily hasn't been done or hasn't been done consistently. It's been done one-off for a project. So I think that's a direction that we can improve on as a community, and it's something that I know within our organization that we're working towards.
Just to shoot and piggyback, and I know Nick was going to sign up and reach out. Is tilapia not an example of a successful, like when you think about aquaculture? Or, I mean, tilapia gets a bad rap. I don't like it. I don't know why I don't know. But no, I don't know why I don't. I just feel like we always talk so negatively about tilapia. Is that not a good example of a sustainable fishery? Or am I totally off here?
A sustainable fishery, not necessarily, but it's a good prospect for aquaculture because they're generally easy to grow compared to other fishery resources. So Alex is the expert on growing them, but in my opinion, they are easy to grow, and that makes it more likely that you can do it successfully, possibly branch from there. And although I think Bahamians have an aversion to tilapia, although many times they don't realize they're actually eating it anyway. It really depends on how you season it and so forth. So it is a viable option for the Bahamas. Bahamas has tried, other operators have. So I think it can be successfully done. There's a success rate here in the Bahamas that we can build on. There's nothing wrong with tilapia once you go in healthy environments and it's wholesome and palatable at the end of the day. To be careful with imports that they are not wholesome and palatable.
I'll weigh in on the tilapia. I think tilapia is a perfect example of a good candidate of a fish for a smaller scale local operation where you're not trying to compete on the global market. If you want to try to grow tilapia here and you want to compete against Asia, for example, you're never going to do it. Their costs of operation is so low that you're never going to be able to compete. That really means that if you want to have a successful operation in the country for the export market, and that's really what you need because locally the demand is not there for large operations. So for the export market, you have to grow a valuable commodity. You have to grow a fish that will fetch a high price, but also that people already know about. A lot of operations fail because people try to grow fish that the market doesn't really know about. You don't want to grow something that you then have to educate your customer on. You want to grow something that your customers already needs and the supply is short.
I know, I'm sorry. We have Nick.
Good night, everybody. I'm in sustainable waste management, and I may need to do more research on fisheries, but I was wondering if you could tell me how you can standardize, but also protect and maybe keep, like, anonymize the data that fishermen have, like when they catch fish, so we can better understand like commercial interests and see what we can do with those products, all those byproducts.
When you say we, you're talking about your company per se or in general?
In general, for the public, I mean, it would be nice for the company,
Right.
but
Like, where's the byproduct company?
yeah, not even just what you're catching on a larger scale. So we're catching 2 million pounds of X versus this much, and how is that impacting our waters? And I was wondering how can we improve the collection of that data? Because I remember, I don't know who said it earlier, but you talked about the standardization of fishing in maybe Canada or around the world. And I just think that would be very beneficial there because fishing is our industry.
From my perspective, we have a challenge now with fishermen sharing certain details about their catch. For example, they definitely want to hide where their favorite spots. From my perspective, the department doesn't need to know the exact locations. What we're after is the bigger picture. How many fishermen were fishing? What effort it took? Did it take 8 days to catch 100 pounds? Did it take 30 days to catch 100 pounds? We don't need to know specific locations, just general information. And so in a way, that is the anonymized information we talk about. You don't need to tell us this exact spot, just tell us, well, maybe around the southern edge of Great Bahama Bight. This is where we fish. That level of detail would be sufficient for us. But certainly share how much you caught, where you caught it, the species. If you have any bycatch, for example, all that information can feed into stock assessments that truly help us. But this is where we need more engagement with fishermen and more dialogue and really bring them on board, make them feel like they're part of the whole process. But that it's really for their benefit that we're asking for this information, that they see that it is for them.
Is that information publicly available?
Um, in the forms of reports, yes. If you see any reports about cash unit efforts, or even total landings that's reported by fishermen, some go through processes as in gather from fishermen and supply to the department as well. So those are available on the FAO. We report that information to the FAO annually as well as the Caribbean Resource Fisheries mechanism. But that isn't very detailed. It's more like total landing. So sometimes monthly information, total landings per month. That will be
And Misha and then Eddie, right? And then Eric. So I'm gonna end it at Eric. Misha.
I would say definitely. I think the running rhetoric is that aquaculture is needed for fisheries. Bearing in mind that the Bahamian government has an obligation to our communities and the average Bahamian person, what is the economic impact that we look at for the average Bahamian fisherman when aquaculture becomes the future?
There is excessive. Sorry, go ahead, Krista.
I don't think it's aquaculture to replace fisheries. So it's just another tool to make sure that there's food security, and in this case, you're supporting an export market primarily. So the fishing that's happening and the fishers that are supplying the Bahamas would still be supplying the Bahamas. But having sustainable fisheries in country is important, and it's not. We need multiple tools basically to ensure that we have the stocks that we need. And there may be an option in the future where we could be using aquaculture for some of the traditional species that have been overfished to potentially assist with supplying food and alleviating the pressure that Alex talked about on the natural fisheries stocks. But for right now, a lot of the aquaculture that's being done is being exported outside of the country. So it's not going to take away from the fishermen. We're not taking away their jobs and removing that source of economic income.
Just to briefly add, there's no reason why it can't be complementary.
Yeah.
That they cannot include the fishermen and aquaculture operations and provide them with an opportunity as well to gain from aquaculture operations themselves as they diversify from just fishing and now engaging in aquaculture as well. There's no reason why we couldn't.
Yeah, because we encourage that diversification with, ecotourism, for example. So some of them do operate as tour guides and things like that. So it's just another potential revenue stream that could be beneficial.
Definitely. Just to add to the question itself, I think definitely you touched on fishermen not having the willingness to give information. In having some conversations with local fishermen, I think the biggest thing is education towards them, because they feel as if conservationists are trying to take away their livelihood or giving them the information to let them know this is complementary and they're still a part of the sector that belongs to them.
Yeah, and you're right. And that goes back to your communication question, because I feel like sometimes it's just we're speaking the same language, not speaking the same language. We want the same things, but we are communicating differently. And so it's making sure that there's the right message, the right messenger, and that people are able to do something with it. So I think that's a work in progress, and definitely making sure we're targeting the right stakeholders, not just young people, is going to be really important if we want to see some progress. And that's, like I said before, it's a lot of room for improvement there.
No, I agree with both of them that it can be complementary. A free market is a good thing. Competition is a good thing, I think. Obviously, you don't want one sector to be overshadowed by another. But I do think that with progression, as you go through a country's progression economically, you're going to have a diversification of industry. And some industries may merge, and people in one industry might get into the other industry.
Eddie?
I guess for Alex. We talk about export all the time, and Bahamas is full of people local, fishermen, hundreds of local fishermen. What are the chances that most of us invent a fish fry and then serve something that is not what they said it was? I mean, we've had parrotfish, replacing grouper and stuff. So yeah, just moving along sideways from tilapia could be a local source for season fish and so on. But don't mention the beautiful nature and symbiotic relationship that had with hydroponics. I was just trying to work out how much it would cost to feed hydroponics with bags of whatever. I think doing research on mushrooms and tomato bags, and that all have to be shipped in before you can create it here. So, what's the relationship between hydroponics and the agriculture for local, small scale resource like that?
I think that could be a really valuable tool in food security and also economic opportunities for smaller scale businesses. We have a little small example at our facility of a small aquaponics tilapia and banana trees as a little model. But there's some businesses here locally already that are doing that. And BAMSI as an educational resource. I think Blue Fields Farm, CEI. So I think there's already, it's started already, but I think it's a great place to grow for sure. Yeah.
And Eric, I saw was the last one.
Yeah, I have an opposite question. Right? So there's been phenomenal growth in the nonprofit sector, conservation, science, etc. Where are my concerns that Dr. Gittens, as great as he is, as smart as he is, I think we have to find a way as a country to get more professional resources into that department, right? And that's just something that I see. Young folks, sorry, Mr. Fox, I call him young because I know he's daddy. Spoke about collecting data, and that's really important. Dr. Gittens speaks very eloquently about all of these aspects of fisheries, enforcement and education and engaging fishermen, etc. And I'm just wondering whether we're seeing yet an understanding and a commitment by the government to that department, right? You see growth in, you see new departments being created, you see climate change units being, exploded in OPM with, new people added every day, etc. But I'm concerned that we don't see this focus. And as you think about advocacy and you talk about conservation connections, certainly I think we all need to be advocates of continued growth and support for the Department of Marine Resources. Are you seeing any growth? But are you seeing a commitment by the government to right-sizing your department?
I want to be very careful in
answering
this. I will simply say that in my 21 years at the department, I've seen significant improvements in terms of staff throughout the islands, the number of vessels, the revision of laws, and so forth, partnerships and so forth. So I've definitely seen improvements, but certainly, in addition, speaking about the Marine Stewardship Council certification as well, but certainly there is room for improvement. There will always be room for improvement. 10 years from now, even if we get all the resources we want, there'll still be room for improvement. So, in that vein, there has been progress. There will always be room for much more significant progress.
Okay, we'll do one more, and then that's the last one. I know I've kept you guys long enough. Thank you.
I don't know a whole lot about aquaculture or So I was just wondering, like, I know that there's concern for the use of like antibiotics and things like that, especially when you talk about land-based like agriculture. And I'm wondering if there's any sort of like thought in limiting those types of solutions if we were to make something like that a mainstream involvement. I think it's a question for
I'll speak on it first. Well, two things. The new Fisheries Act in 2020 is now being put forth. It has an entire section on aquaculture, and in there they outline requirements for aquaculture drugs. They have to be approved by fisheries in order for them to be used. So you already have some sort of regulatory framework there as a starting point. Speaking from our operation, we don't use any antibiotics, any drugs. We don't use any aquaculture drugs. I would think, based on your design of your operation, if you keep your densities at a reasonable level, the water flow at a reasonable level, you can avoid a lot of these issues from the start.
So I will definitely end it there. And I want to thank my panelists so much thank you guys for coming out this evening, and I hope that this continues to spark conversation. We still have the venue for a little under an hour, so please continue talking about yourselves. If there's any food left, eat that, and drink the rest of the food. Thank you so much.